Hey, Tom. Hey, everyone. So welcome to today's Microsoft Learn Live event. We're here to talk about organizing a fabric lake house using the medallion architecture design. My name is Joshua Higginbotham. I'm a senior architect at Centric Consulting and a Microsoft Data Platform MVP.
Hey, I'm Tom. Welcome. So happy that you join our show about the medallion architecture. I am a Microsoft Data Platform MVP and I'm working as a solution architect focusing on Power BI and Fabric at Munich Re.
Sorry. Quick call out. If you would like to follow along with these modules, you can hit this QR link or go to the provided HTML link, or sorry, HTTPS link to follow along as we go through this module. Want to first shout out our awesome moderators that are helping us in chat today. We have both Armando and Kevin Chant here, both Microsoft MVPs. Uh, we will be answering questions where we can, and then we can also follow up at a later time if needed. But feel free to ask any question. We're here to help and try to make this as impactful as we can today. Like I said earlier, go to this link to follow along. We'll kind of have a couple slides today that will cover this. You can always do some of this live with us, or you can follow up afterwards, at whatever time you want. Like I said, we want this to be very interactive. Ask questions. You have, uh, you know, a lot to cover today, but we'll have plenty of time to answer any questions that you have around this module. Anything that we can help support you in. Just a call out, Microsoft puts on these cloud skills challenges. You can go and complete the Fabric's analytics engineer cloud skill challenge to get a 50% exam discount around what we're covering today, as well as throughout the whole MS Learn live event. Uh, don't forget to register for the exam. Hopefully, you're attending today not only to gain a better knowledge of Fabric and the tools within it, but hopefully also trying to impact your career a bit more. Go take these exams; they're highly useful credentials to use for your career in the future. There is a Fabric exam cram coming up. You can go to this link um, here to kind of look at that. Um, and gain a bit more information, explore the certification, look at what the exam covers so you can prepare better for it um, whenever you so choose to take it. Apologies. That's what I get for hitting buttons during a live event.
So maybe back. There we are again.
There we go. Yeah, I'll try not to hit a random button again. Uh, so Fabric is a new suite of tools. Like I say, Fabric's kind of an umbrella product. There's many tools underneath it. The roles within that tool, the Fabric, solution suite, if you will, it varies based off your needs. It's a unified workspace for your teams to work, whether you're an analytics engineer, data analyst, data engineer, data scientist. There's plenty of guidance around this within the Fabric Career Hub, which you can find by going to the link above. Take a look at each. Just because you may be an analytics engineer, it's important for you to understand how your role interconnects with other roles, as well as if you're an analytics engineer today, maybe tomorrow you want to be a data scientist, and you can go look at what you would have to learn or at least conceptually understand to be able to go towards that. Microsoft has built a great knowledge network around how all this plays in, so take advantage of that. And hopefully you'll be able to go down a path that meets whatever objective that you have. The slide was a little off, sorry. So the Microsoft Community Conference is coming up March 26th through 28th of this year. You can register with the code MSCUS for $100 discount. There's plenty of materials around Fabric there. This is a very large conference around all data, AI, all the products within it. If you have the opportunity to go, take advantage of it. It's going to be a great resource to kind of kickstarting your career in Fabric as well as some of the other products within it. Hopefully, you've been able to follow along throughout this whole Learn Live series. This series has been going on for about a week and a half, give or take. You can follow up with some of the recordings of these events through YouTube, as well as the events tomorrow and Thursday, presented by other members of the MVP community. So take advantage of that. There's some other follow-up events that are going to be happening, so stay tuned for that information at a later time. All right. So now that we got through some of those intros, what are you here today? Hopefully you'll be able to kind of get a good understanding through these slides, but we're going to have an exercise near the end that will kind of take what we've covered in these slides and put it to practical use. But we're going to describe the principles of using the medallion architecture in data management. You'll hear medallion architecture heavily in here because it is, while not a new concept, it may be a new concept to what you have traditionally worked with. How do you apply that medallion architecture framework within the Microsoft Fabric environment? How can you analyze data stored in the lakehouse using DirectLake and Power BI? And then we're going to describe some best practices for ensuring that what we build within Fabric is both secure and governed as we store more and more data within these medallion architectures. So it's not a new concept. Whether you're within the US or abroad, data-driven companies are a thing. Most companies pride themselves on being data-driven organizations at this point. It's what leads them to make certain decisions, and you're probably working on a team or a project that is facilitating the ability for your company, your team, to be able to make impactful decisions around their business. The Fabric Lakehouse kind of blends multiple tools and technologies to allow you to manage and analyze this data in kind of an ideal state. One way that we can do this is through the medallion architecture that we'll cover today. The medallion architecture is a pretty defined process or concept within the data estate these days. But we'll kind of talk through that, how it is within Fabric, and then what can you do and what you should maybe steer away from within this. But generally, the medallion architecture brings a structure and efficiency to the lakehouse environment. It allows you to stage your data across various stages that allow you to do certain things like your traditional transformational deduplication type logic, and only present it to users, whether they're technical users or business users, based off of those different hierarchy, or that hierarchy of that medallion architecture. And we'll go into a bit more detail later. This information is important whether you're an advanced seasoned data engineer or you're just now starting out. Some of these concepts have been around for a long time, just under a different name or different kind of paradigm. But we're going to cover it a bit more today, and hopefully you'll be able to take this and leverage it at some place within your tech stack. You'll be able to follow along with the MS Learn module as well. So if we don't cover something in as detail as you would like, please go to there. You'll be able to find that stuff in more detail as well. Some helpful links to maybe get into that detail at a later time. So we're going to describe the medallion architecture. And for this, I'm going to hand this over to Tom.
Yes, thank you very much, Josh. So now this is how medallion architecture looks like in an ideal world. So, but sometimes it's not that easy to spot these bronze, silver, gold, to put a finger on the artifact. But we will see how this can look like in Fabric. And first of all, the medallion architecture is, let's say, a concept that helps to improve data quality. And what makes a Fabric lakehouse special is, I'm not sure if you have attended all the um, other episodes of this learning of this learning thing. Um, so Fabric is, or the lakehouse is built on the Delta Lake format, or uh, Delta Parquet, or Delta tables. So sometimes this is very often used, but not. Um, but what does this mean? So basically, Delta tables or Delta Parquet is a storage format that is used to store your data. And what's really cool about this is that this storage format can be read by many applications. So it's not proprietary, meaning if something is stored in an Oracle database or a SQL Server database, and I do not speak SQL, somehow this data has to be exported to be processed by whatever other application. So, and this difficulty, or this challenge, is gone with the Delta Parquet format. And next to that, it also, the Delta table format is supporting ACID transactions, meaning they are durable, consistent, and also, of course, isolation and atomacy. That is what we know from our beloved SQL Server. And this is something that when I try to explain the Delta Parquet format and say, okay, it's an open format, then people sometimes are a little bit shocked, because they think that everyone is able to open a file and change it. Of course not. So this is what this isolation durability thing is also about. And not everyone is able to write or overwrite an existing one. But this is what um, the foundation is the Delta Parquet format. And the bronze layer is where data is ingested. So it can be considered the landing zone. Then improvements to this landed data will be made in the silver layer. And finally, data will be prepared for consumption by other applications like Power BI using the DirectLake connection mode, or data scientists are using the gold tables from the gold layer. So basically, if you think bronze, silver is too complex, and gold, these three things, maybe it's possible to reduce it and say bronze and silver are the kitchen and gold is the dining room. So you do not want to have access everyone coming to your restaurant and run around in the kitchen. No, please be seated in the gold and have the menu and enjoy the meal. So it's about data quality enrichment, and this is data is transformed. So maybe you can now go for the next slide, please. This looks a little bit different, but it's the same. Bronze layer, it's getting all the data. Data is landed without any transformation, and it's still this, let's say, the source format. So it can also be very special if you're talking about relational data, but this is a different topic at all. So we will work with the exercise, and there's CSV, and along we will create structure using the silver layer, and finally we are going to create a star schema that then can be easily used with or built for the foundation for the semantic model in directly connection mode. And yes, please, maybe the next slide. So here we will see file upload. We will directly load it into a lakehouse. We will see it live. So sometimes, or let's say most of the time, data ingestion is a little bit more challenging because it depends on data of the amount of data that you want to ingest into your lakehouse somewhere that you want to process during later stages. The amount of data, the frequency of how often new data will be show up. And maybe sometimes data is a little bit more complex if I have extra deep nested JSON documents because someone is thinking that schema on read is cooler than schema on write, then it can be a little bit more complex than a simple file upload. But nevertheless, I'm working for a large organization, and sometimes we load CSV file into our data loading pipeline. So CSV file exists. If you can now to the next slide, please. Here, let's say after who is responsible for all these things. Maybe it's also an organizational impact, and maybe this will also impact how you design your lakehouse, your medallion architecture in Fabric at all. So, for example, I call this the data engineering team who is taking care of data ingestion, also providing the first bits of structure, meaning adding housekeeping columns or doing data cleaning, like replacing missing customers with some wording, with some unknown customer text. So, because if you are familiar with Power BI data modeling, you know it's always bad if I have something that is null, especially if I want this column to be linked to a dimension table or things like that. And then finally, this silver layer can be used by subsequent teams, or the data engineering team is also preparing the gold standard that then will be finally consumed by other people. And so for this reason, maybe the silver layer is the overall repository for data that will be refined, further refined, enriched, make it gold. Yes. If you go next for the next slide, please. So then here it is. We are almost done. Looks simple. I have bronze and I have silver, and then I refine it, aggregate data, so that I have can I build my star schema that then can be used by Power BI, or also the gold layer tables can be used by data scientists. Yes, so this is a gold layer. It's done. Everything is cooked. It's on the menu, and now you can choose. If you now go to the next slide, please. So before, do we always have 3 layers, or do we have just 1 or 6? As always, it depends. And for this reason, maybe you can just hit. So here we have an extra layer. So it's not 3, it's 4. This is because if I'm considering about events that are maybe streamed into something, meaning the raw layer, then there will be maybe probably a lot of single JSON documents that then will be picked up from the bronze layer, put it somewhere, and then this is also going on. So, but maybe the next thing. In our exercise, we have a simple concept. We have just a couple of files and things like that. Sometimes maybe it's also a good idea to place your and this is very, very ugly because it's, of course, it's not gold. It's bronze, silver, and gold. I'm so sorry. I do not know how this could happen. I guess it's my wife's fault. She is not here, so I can blame her, and I will not get it. So please excuse me. So the left one is bronze, the middle one is silver, and the right one, of course, is gold. But depending on the workloads that are on that are going on, maybe it's a good idea, or you have to, because it's demanding, put the bronze layer and the silver layer on a different, larger fabric capacity, and the consumption layer on a smaller fabric capacity. Or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe you have just less demanding data engineering tasks, but you have tens of thousands of users, so maybe you need a larger compute engine that is querying your code layer. So, and besides that typo, I'm done with this slide. Thank you, Josh. So, how many layers do we have? It's about the complexity of what we built, the amount of data, the complexity, how often do we need to update our data? We know we are living in a world where we are talking about sensors, things like that, event streaming, but sometimes we just have a text file, or we have 3 text files, and maybe this is not a bad thing. I guess if you just have 10 text files from this 10, 20,000 rows, you are in a lucky position, because you do not have to do all this data engineering thinking. But maybe you have tens of millions of Excel files, then maybe it becomes more complex. And this is how we can start small, as we will to do today in the exercise, and this can grow with your needs. So, and I guess this is what I wanted to say about the medallion architecture.
Yeah, not. I'll say, Tom, this was one of the things that like changed it for me, if you will. I know that sounds a bit weird, but coming from traditional ETL development, on premises development, if you will, to more of a new age data engineer approach where we're leveraging, PySpark, Python, if you will, to do our data engineering. We're leveraging things that are not your traditional SQL Server anymore, and like not all data is stored within SQL Server. A lot of this stuff that we covered within this section around the medallion architecture, like it's been around in some conceptual logic for a while. I remember back when I first started, we would move data from source into a staging environment, do some level of transformation, and then we would load it into our persisted storage, whether that SQL Server or whatever it may be. But there was no real like in my opinion, there was no real defined methodology around it. Like everybody had their own way of naming it, their own structure, their own approach. But the medallion lakehouse structure provides kind of a framework to start off with, and then build onto that. And it kind of gives you an understanding of the kind of the perspective or the the persona that's going to be accessing this data and when. And so it kind of brings some clarity to a structure that didn't in my opinion, as me growing my career as a data engineer, wasn't there before. And then like Delta format just changed everything. That
Absolutely, absolutely.
that now allowed you to build enterprise capabilities within your ETL solutions that wasn't readily there when you were working in CSV or Parquet or some other format. So it just changed everything. So I've always been really excited about this stuff and love seeing this being brought into a product like Fabric.
Okay, can you please go back a slide because I want to answer a question that Matt put. So maybe this, no, one slide back, because one slide back, another one. Go back to the first slide, please. And so there's sorry, Josh. There's the question, where is data stored in Fabric? So first of all, there's this concept of, or no, it's not a concept. It's the idea or the technical implementation of data storage is in one lake. So basically, finally, data data packet table or file is stored in one lake. And now the question is, who or how is this conceptually done, or who has written this table? Is this lakehouse or data warehouse? So sometimes maybe people are saying, oh, it depends. If you are more familiar then with SQL, then maybe you will use the data warehouse. If you are more familiar with Python, maybe then you will use the lakehouse. Personally, I think because the Delta Parquet file is a foundation, and I consider the lakehouse closer to this foundation, I assume that I will go with the lakehouse instead of adding extra complexity by implementing a data warehouse. I will cover this in the exercise because um, both the data warehouse store have something that is called the SQL Analytics endpoint. And this is more or less conceptually the same inside the lakehouse and the warehouse. So as always, it depends. If you're more familiar with SQL, go for the data warehouse. If you're more familiar with the lakehouse or want to be closer to the Delta Parquet thing, go with the lakehouse. So, and then now I hopefully this answers the question. As always, it's a depends question.
And this kind of goes back to what you were mentioning before around customizing your medallion architecture.
Yes.
The medallion architecture doesn't innately state that it has to be in Lakehouse. You may state that your silver is actually your data warehouse. That's where
Yep.
you're um, creating some structure and providing some of the stuff that will lead you to get to that gold layer. And that may be in, you know, a lakehouse, could be Power BI semantic model. It all depends. And it's going to be based off of um, what your business needs are, what the size of your data looks like, stuff like that. All right. So now that we kind of covered some of the conceptual things around the medallion architecture, how do you implement the medallion architecture in Fabric? So we're going to go through an exercise that's going to provide a bit more clarity to this. As Tom mentioned, you have this hierarchical structure that you've defined within the medallion architecture that will lead you to your end data product data solution. We have to first create a lakehouse within Fabric. Once we do that, then we can set up these layers. For today's exercise, we're going to cover setting up the bronze, silver, and gold layer. Depending on the tool that you're using within the Fabric suite, your bronze, you could be loading this data in through data pipelines, data flows, or notebooks. If you've not had a chance to look at how notebooks work, maybe you've traditionally worked in SSIS or Azure Data Factory. Notebooks is just another way for you to do data engineering type principles within, Python. So take a look at that. There's no hard fast rule on what you have to use to get it in the bronze, but you're going to have to use some form of a data engineering ETL type tool. We're going to then take that data from our raw bronze layer, if you will, and we're going to go through our cleansing validation routine. These things could be like deduplicating your data, eliminating null values, whatever you may need to do. And we're going to leverage data flows or notebooks to be able to facilitate that type of work. And then once we go into gold, that's where we're going to do some of like that business logic type transformations. So we're taking what is in our silver that may be built out like based off of your basic like dimensional model, star schema type approach, but we're going to bring it into this gold layer in a way that the business best understands it. We're putting some business validation against it to make sure that the data fits their purpose. And you can access that either through the SQL endpoint that you'll gain access with through the lakehouse, or like a direct dataset query. Next, we're going to cover query and report on data in your favorite Fabric lakehouse. So you have data within your lakehouse that you need to be able to access. There's a couple ways that you can gain access to this. That includes things like the SQL endpoint or the DirectLake mode in Power BI. This is all going to depend on what your team is skilled in. Not everybody has gone through the exercise of like learning Python. There are plenty of data professionals that have picked that up into their skill set, their toolbox, if you will. But you may have teams that are only familiar in T-SQL, and so by leveraging the SQL endpoint, you're going to be able to allow them to work with this data in their native language, if you will. I'll note that the SQL endpoint is only read only. It only operates in read only. So if you need to make any updates to this data, you're going to have to go back into your data flows, into your notebooks, and update that data through that. That does allow you some level of security, so you can ensure that your data analysts, your business users that are querying this data are not able to change anything about the data that you've loaded. So that's kind of the first abstraction of security, if you will, within this. That's no different than what we've seen within Power BI connecting to a data set now. You're not able to do any of that, which has been good. In addition to the SQL endpoint, we do have the DirectLake mode within Power BI. When you create the lakehouse, it automatically provisions an associated like default data set that you can connect to. You kind of see a lot of that within some of the tools out there where there will be a button that says I want to connect to this in Power BI. You hit it and it opens it up connected to that model. So it kind of eases the ability to connect to it and be able to access that data and start to analyze it and start looking at it to make any adjustments that you need. The SQL pane within Fabric is just like a query editor window within SSMS. You get the IntelliSense that you would see within SSMS. Some of the same functionality. It's a web-based browser, which is nice, but it doesn't mean that you can't connect to that in whatever tool of trade that you like to work in, whether that's SQL Server Management Studio, Azure Data Studio. But you have a couple options to be able to kind of get through this and connect and really go through the data that you have. As we kind of mentioned, you're going to adjust and tailor your medallion layers off of the various needs that you're going to have. It's really up to you and your team to define how you want to organize this data. That may mean that you store your data in various workspaces, same workspace, same lakehouse, multiple lakehouses, and we'll kind of talk about that in some follow-on slides. We do have a question, and I'll read it out. Lots of questions. How do you organize Dev, QA, Prod, and within the medallion architecture approach? We're going to try to answer that within the exercise, and that's just mainly because we'll be able to, give you a visual example of this. So did want to at least call it out. We are going to answer questions a bit later, and hopefully the exercise will kind of bring some more clarity to that. So considerations for managing your lakehouse. It's not one of those things that you can just push a couple buttons, spin it up, and then forget about it. There are things that you have to do from a management perspective. Whether you have dedicated administrators that are going to support this, or you as a data engineer, data architect, whatever it may be, will have to support. There are things that we need to consider around how do we secure our data within the lakehouse, and then how are we going to get these solutions promoted through the various environments. Whether that is a full SDL suite where you have a dev, test, stage, production. These are things that you have to think about, especially if you work in highly regulated environments. But if not, like, it's best practice to have these things set up to allow you to release changes iteratively through your environments to ensure that you're not breaking your business as you do this. And likewise, you want to make sure that you're not giving people access to data that they shouldn't have access to. You wouldn't want business users to be able to query data as it's being transformed and provide visuals or interpretations that would be off. So, how do we secure our lakehouse? There's a couple different ways that you can do this. We'll cover a couple of these now, and then definitely dig into the materials. Go to your Fabric workspaces and start to look at this and see what you need to do. This is going to adjust based off of whatever standards that you've set. Work with your information security office, your CISO, whatever it may be, to make sure that you're evaluating some of these newer things that are being brought into the fold and ensure that you're following best practices. But there are things like setting permissions at the workspace level. This is something that's been around for ages within Power BI. I can sit there and say this group or this user has access to this workspace and not this workspace. But then we have item level permissions, where we can control access to specific items, whether that's a set lake house, whatever it may be. But that's how we can start to delineate who can access the gold layer, who can access the silver layer, and who can access the bronze layer. It's considered in my viewpoint best practice that nobody touches bronze other than your data engineering processes, your ETL processes. There's very little need to go there other than maybe for some triage, debugging of the data as it comes through. But you don't want somebody from the business being able to access that. And so through this type of process, we can secure that and ensure that they can't have access to it. Based off of how you want to set this up, you may create workspaces that separate these lake houses and these medallion layers, if you will, or you may stick with a singular lake house that has all of these. And again, that's going to just be based off of the way that you operate as a team and as a business. Um, Gold layer is where you are going to want to limit the most amount of access. There's very little that should probably have access at a write level. Everything should be set by default as a read only. And that's mainly just to protect the integrity of that data. The only thing that should be doing any type of insert, update, delete type stuff should be your ETL processes. We're not going to go into a lot of detail around CI/CD within this, but definitely follow this link. You know, you can either go through the QR code or to the embedded link, but look at the Git integration through Fabric that allows you to do source control within Fabric. Within Azure DevOps, it allows you to kind of look through some of the additional offerings that have come out with Fabric that weren't there before. So definitely look at that. It's critical to an enterprise solution to have this stuff built out through a CI/CD pipeline of some sort. But it's one of those things that hopefully you've had some experience with beforehand, and enhancing that to Fabric shouldn't be too large of a lift. But it'll cover things like how to handle Git branching, which is a fairly it sounds fairly simple, but it can be an advanced topic for different groups. And just like what we talked about with medallion architectures, you may have a branching strategy that um, will be set based off of your needs and such. So one of the last call outs we'll talk about CI/CD is in an enterprise environment, you're going to, or enterprise solution, if you will. I don't want to say environment. CI/CD is going to be critical to your ability to deliver new features, new functionality to your gold layer without impacting your business. I've been in positions where a release took many hours to complete, and that's not something that you want to deal with when you're trying to release functionality to the business. This data is highly critical to your company, to your teams, and so you want to make sure that you're able to get this stuff out there in a seamless, repeatable fashion, and that's how this integration to Git is going to work. So can't speak more highly of investing some effort in this past today's sessions or this week's event. All right. That brings us to our exercise. So I'm going to hand this over to Tom, who has some great stuff worked up for us. Tom, you're muted.
Of course, I'm mute, and now I'm not unmute any longer. So here we are. So this is what, if you are following this learning path, then you are here, and maybe we are now going for the exercise, and I will not do each and every single step that is covered right here, because as I first did it myself, I realized I was slow, because it took me longer than 45 minutes to complete this exercise, because I was looking for this button and that button. So I will not click everything, but I will hopefully will be detailed enough to give you an understanding what's going on. So first, there have been questions about how is Fabric workload enabled. So first of all, you need a workspace. And there's also a question, can everything be built in a single workspace? Yes, it can. Is this a good idea? Probably yes, sometimes maybe not. So, but first of all, if you want to be able to do this Fabric thing, then you need to have this little diamond next to your workspace name. And this is also necessary that your workspace is assigned to a capacity that is supported, that is supporting Fabric workloads. And this can be a premium premium capacity or a dedicated Fabric capacity or premium trial. So basically, but if you are not allowed to add your workspace to one of these capacities, then you have to ask your Fabric admin, as also in this case, it's not necessary to raise a support ticket because this cannot be solved by Microsoft, because it can be solved by, or has to be solved by your Fabric admins. Okay, I know sometimes it can be hard to identify these people, but this is a totally different story. So what we see right here is I created a medallion architecture workspace, and if you go for the data engineering thing, then you have a lakehouse that you can create, a notebook, things that are most typically with your data engineering workloads. And inside this medallion architecture, I created a lakehouse called sales, and notice this smaller or this lowercase letter s, because if you are familiar with M, then you will also learn that Python is, if it's about object names, is case sensitive. So please be careful about that. And here's also when I create a lakehouse, automatically it will create a semantic model. So this is a semantic model, the default semantic model that is showing all the data tables. And this is the SQL Analytics endpoint that I already mentioned. And this is the icon for the warehouse is exactly the same. So it's not, I guess it's not just a matter of imagination or loss or lack of imagination, that both items have the same items have the same icon. It's also because they are very close. They are not 100% feature compatible, at least not at the moment, but nevertheless. And I also created already two notebooks. And if we are here at the Microsoft Learn, basically it starts with make sure that it's on a premium capacity, and then we have to upload or load first, ingest our data into the bronze layer. And this is quite easy because I go here for the sales lakehouse and I have tables. Everything that is a delta table or delta paquet format will show up in the tables section. And I also already created a bronze file folder, and there I will upload my three files. So this is my very manual approach of doing this. So if you're in the lucky position that you can upload your weekly, monthly, or yearly CSV files, consider you being lucky, because you do not have to take care about this ingestion thing. Nevertheless, then now I have my my bronze folder, and if you now I'm in a preview, so I'm able to watch this in a preview. So, and this is very important that you realize that there is no column header in these demo files. Why is this important? I will cover this later. Now going back to this this exercise, it tells me that I'm going to create a notebook that I will then name to transform data for silver, and copy all these snippets into the notebook. I've done this already. And here's my transform for silver notebook. And here we see that Python code, because it's about notebooks. And I have to admit that I'm a little bit in love with Python. For this reason, Python is different than data flows Gen 2. Python is code first, data flows Gen 2, neglecting the advanced editor is no code. So it depends. There are pros and cons for both approaches. As always, it depends. So, and when you see here this header, this is a Python file. I say my CSV files do not have a header, and maybe you will check this, but it doesn't matter for the exercise at all. And this is also something that we have to be careful about, is this head 10, because from a data frame, it tells me that only the first 10 rows will be shown. And this is good. So, and if I run this notebook, I run this cell, it works. Now it needs a little bit of extra time because my cluster was paused. Now we are here with my 10 rows. Then I add something to this data frame based on the files. I add extra columns. A file name, if I call it an extra attribute, it's flagged because there is some kind of story in the exercise about the fiscal year. And I also add some housekeeping columns. And then finally, I use fancy Python PySpark code to add a new column, customer name, and make this conditional. Here I'm replacing nulls. If the customer name is null or is empty, then I add unknown. Otherwise, I take the value from the column customer name. And if you are wondering about this little extra function, it's a literal that allows me to create or use a constant value. Because if you are familiar with SQL, then you would just use unknown. But here, because it's PySpark, this constant value has to be wrapped in this function. When I'm doing this, I will see the next. Sorry. And here we have our extra columns. And it's also a file name. So this is also something maybe you are wondering how this came, because I said file name and then I have a fancy function, input file name, that I'm also imported right here. I will cover this import section for a cell in the next notebook a little more deeply. So when we are creating a data frame, a Spark data frame based on files, then there is this extra column will be added automatically. And this function makes it appear. We cannot get rid of it, but if we want to show it, then we just have to use this input file function. So I consider this a great way to have data lineage. And if I'm have enough space, then we will see it that sooner or later, here's my bronze CSV version, and version is also something about a concept of the delta packet format. So this is quite handy. I do not have to take care about this using Spark when I want to have this data lineage information. And finally, I create a delta table. I've read the CSV files, and now I create a table inside my table folder right here, and say it's called sales, meaning the lakehouse, and sales silver is the name of the table. So, and also you can see right here, I have a naming convention, or this is a naming convention introduced by the exercise. Just add the metal, the layer at the end of the table name. So if when I'm executing this, then this creates a table with this schema right here. If you are not familiar with Python, then maybe you are wondering what these two lines are here. I'm saying from something that is called PySpark with a module or class SQL, then there's a module types. I import everything from a module or package I call delta tables. I also import everything. This is indicated by the star. So now I have created my delta table, and if I refresh it, it will hopefully appear. Yes, it's there. Currently it's empty because I do not input some data. So now I'm importing the delta table, and now I call the delta table, this is my delta table, and then I want to update this currently empty table with something from df. So this is what I'm going to do. And this is happening in this merge statement. But if you are not familiar with Python or notebooks and cells, you may wonder what this df is. And this is what I love about notebooks, because it helps me to develop my code in chunks. And I can refer to something that is called df, data frame, that I defined in this second cell. I can reference this variable in subsequent cells. So this is what I really love about, one thing that I love about developing with notebooks. So, and now I'm executing this. So this is a merge, meaning an existing table will be updated with new values. So this is also some complexity. Whenever new data is arriving, how do I always import everything? Do I just update? What is when some things are changed? This is exactly what you can define with a merge statement. But defining a merge statement is special on its own. Here I just say if I do a merge, if sales order number, the identifier, and the order date are equal from, if this is equal, then I do a matched update. If not, I do an insert into this table, and that's it. So if I run this, I'm done with, I have data loaded from the files section browse to a table that I call sales. And here we are. It's done in 8 seconds, but it's also not 3 billion of rows. It's only 32,000. And now I go for the next step. And this next step is now I'm transforming data for the gold thing where I'm creating from this single silver table my dimensional model or different tables. And so everything starts here. Explore data. And I will skip this part because I will show how this SQL endpoint can be used at a later stage. But then I'm transforming data for gold layer. And this is what I have done in my second notebook called Transform Data for Gold. And this is also something that I really like about notebooks. I can add headers or commands that help me to reduce the space, that help me to focus on what's going on. And I can do this by just hovering over here. And here I have this markdown or code. I want to add a markdown cell. And if you are not familiar with markdown is a little bit of, depending on how many hashes or hash signs I use, this one hash sign is header 1, and I type it reading the silver data. And now we see that I have reading silver data. And all what happens is, if I collapse this, everything between this and the next first header is collapsed, expanded. And now this is what I'm reading. I'm now reading the sales silver data. And here it's important, if you accidentally use a sales lakehouse name with capital S and the other way around, then maybe it will break. And you're wondering why, because you just copied it from the exercise, maybe. So now I have this, and everything is working. And now it's running. Now I'm reading the data into my variable called df. It's very creative, df. Maybe it stands for data frame or whatever. Maybe data frame, not sure. So it's done. And now I'm starting from here to create my dimensional model. It's about creating tables that allow me to create my semantic model based on the star schema paradigm. So I added something here that is not in the exercise. It's about this tiny star. And there's something that is called the Zen of Python. It's old, but there's one saying or one sentence: explicit is better than implicit. And when I'm not familiar with the functions that I want to use, I tend to use the star. But then sooner or later, if I have many packages that I'm using to create my Python code, then I maybe do not know what package is providing this function. For this reason, I prefer to have it like so. From PySpark, import these functions. And so, but nevertheless, let's create this. Oops.
Not to distract. But that's a good call out, Tom. If you're getting if you're bringing Python into your suite of languages that you need to learn, you need to be able to start from somewhere. The link that Tom calls out, it references the PEP 8 style guide, best practice type stuff, and so you can go there if you're trying to learn Python, or maybe you've learned Python but you haven't really gone down that path of understanding what is the best practice around how do you code in Python to be able to support multi-developer type solutions. That's a good place to start. So that's an amazing call out.
Yeah. So now sorry, by adding this comment, I lost this line. I'm sorry for that. Please excuse me. But it wasn't. Now I have created my delta table called dim gold, dim date gold, and if I refresh, there it is. Now I'm using also a function based on my variable data frame containing all the data from all the 3 CSV files. I dropped duplicates, meaning from the order date, because I want to create a dimension table. This means it only should contain single values. Then I select the column order date and all the dates that I derive from this order date column. So this is what is going on. Now I have create my dimension table gold, dimension date table gold. Then I'm also good with it's still running. Sorry for that. Here we are. So, and please, here I have had 10 because maybe my table has billions of rows and I just want to have 10. So maybe this is, if you're familiar with select top 10 whatsoever, here I just have the first 10 rows. But this is also something that is very helpful during development, but we will see it in a couple of minutes why this maybe is something that can also become confusing. So, and then basically here I have it. It's once again, I have a merge statement where I'm adding to my existing dim date gold. Currently it's empty, but if new data arrives, example for 2022 or 3 or 4, then I need new dates. And this is what's happening with a merge statement. If it's not matched, then it will be added. So, and to spare you some things, I will hit run all right now because I want to showcase something. So now all the things that I have copied from here in a single notebook, are in my are run one after the other. So, and finally, I have my fact table somewhere. Here is the delta table for a dim customer. Then I have my items, my product table. Finally, another merge statement, and once again, this fact sales goal is also a little bit specific. So I assume that everything has been running, and hopefully everything has been successfully run. So it looks like, yes, it's 6:10 p.m. So everything worked as expected. This is good. So for this reason, when I refresh this, this looks good. Here is something special. It's also about dimensional modeling or star schema. What I'm doing here with the fact sales goal is I'm replacing or adding the integer that I've created ways before. So my fact table only contains the IDs that I created automatically. What this means is the business key is replaced by a more or less meaningless integer key. And this is also what is happening. Sorry. What is happening here when I prepare this? Because here I'm preparing a join between the df table, and then I join the dimension table on a customer name, but I select then the ID. So that this means my data frame then has the customer ID, the item ID, the order date, and not any longer my fact table does not contain the customer name or the item name, meaning the product name. So this is what happens here. So this is also something that looks odd, but it can become a little bit more simplistic. And what I also like, but this is maybe also not that special, is this type of I have an object followed by a method, meaning this object will be renamed. And then I have this another method join. This type of programming is called method chaining. And I think it helps to be more readable instead of creating each and every new lines every time. So then people are saying, yes, maybe it's not that good. So it's maybe a philosophical thing. I love this kind of method training. What I tend to avoid is that I do not use the object. So then I will close this because it run everything, and then I will go back to my warehouse and go back for the SQL Analytics endpoint, because there I have a simple query that I now run. This is odd. So this should not have happened. So what I wanted to show is that I counting the number of rows in my sales silver table, because we also have questioned about where should we do this everything. uh, Dev, Q&A, prod, it depends. The bronze layer is cannot be compared with bronze. The bronze layer cannot be compared with dev because it can be complex on its own. And I also try to create resilient code. So I always try to run my code more than once. And when I run my code twice, then it's a good idea. If nothing changed, the number of rows in my silver table should be the same, not more, not less, should be the same. So then it's also a good idea that I have my uh, merge statement properly set up. So with this set, I'm done with my exercise, and back to you.
Great stuff, Tom. So to round us out, uh, wanted to call out. So what we covered today, and hopefully what you've seen throughout the week, and what you'll hopefully continue to see over the next couple days as we finish this MS Learn live series, is a foundational approach to getting started in Fabric. As you saw in the demo today, we directly imported these three CSV files into a bronze layer. That's obviously not going to be what you will be doing, or hopefully should be doing, in a production environment. You're going to be leveraging data flows, notebooks to be able to automatically ingest this data. But hopefully this gets you started, and then you can take that and build on that based off of whatever your business needs are. If you followed along during the event, that's great, but make sure to go back out and run through this again if you will. You can sign up for a Fabric trial capacity to be able to access this. You don't have to go and try to convince your boss or your company to go spend money just for you to figure this out. So definitely leverage that trial capacity to learn this stuff. We're going to do a quick knowledge check. So there should be a poll. So if you can go out to the link provided, uh, we'll see if this works well. So our first question is, which of the following sets of layers are typically associated with the medallion architecture for data management? We have A, raw, polished, refined; B, bronze, silver, gold; or C, initial, intermediate, and final. I feel like there should be some Jeopardy music or something.
So luckily, I don't hear it.
All right, we'll give it a couple seconds. All right. And our answer is B, bronze, silver, and gold. Thankfully, everyone voted for that, so Tom and I at least did a decent job of articulating what those were. So
So
we're
I
off
would
to a good
say we
start.
have an also very smart audience.
Yeah, we do. All right, next question. Which tool is best suited for data transformation in Fabric when dealing with large scale data that will continue to grow? We have A, data flows Gen 2, B, pipelines, or C, notebooks. Okay. All right, we have C, notebooks. Good majority voted for notebooks. Some votes are still coming in, so I guess you're cheating a little bit, but that's fine. So yeah, when your data starts to scale out, you're definitely going to work in notebooks. You're going to leverage that Spark cluster that's running behind the scenes. That's when you start to get in the massive parallel processing type architectures for these larger data sets. So definitely look up MPP architectures if you're not familiar with that. All right, last question. What is the benefit of storing different layers of your lakehouse in separate workspaces? A, it can enhance security, manage capacity use, and optimize cost effectiveness. B, it makes it easier to share data with colleagues. Or C, there's no benefit of storing different layers of your lakehouse in separate workspaces. All right. And the answer is A, it can enhance security, manage capacity use, and optimize cost effectiveness. Uh, we covered that pretty extensively on this, but definitely dig further in, start to talk with your team, your colleagues to figure out what works best for you and how you want to split that out. All right, so that brings us to the end. Just to summarize what we talked about, we described the principles of using the medallion architecture in data management. We covered how to apply the medallion architecture framework within the Microsoft Fabric environment. Somebody mentioned the medallion architecture is a concept, a framework that is used in other products, but this is specific to Fabric. But that this knowledge that you gain can be used elsewhere. Analyzing data stored in the lakehouse using the DirectLake and Power BI. We covered that for a conceptual level. We didn't have time to go into that within our demo, but definitely go out, take a look at that, connect to it through that direct lake option, and visualize it within Power BI. And then we describe best practices for ensuring that what we have built within Fabric is both secure and governed to ensure that we're protecting our data and our customers or whatever it may be within this medallion architecture. Call it out again, but make sure you go through these exercises, go through the MS Learn material. If you're going to approach the certification, there's some additional resources that are coming up that will help you prep for that. It is a beta exam. If you've never gone through a beta exam, definitely read up on that. It is a bit different than your non-beta types, if you will, but definitely valuable. Don't miss tomorrow's session on ingesting data with Spark and Microsoft Fabric notebooks. So this just kind of continues on and talks about how to bring this data in from external sources. We didn't cover it today, but there are things that you're going to want to look into, like things like shortcuts and such, to be able to gain access to other locations outside of your OneLake or your maybe Azure environment. And then just to cover the remaining schedule, so we have the session tomorrow on ingesting data with Spark and Microsoft notebooks. And then on the 8th, we have administer Microsoft Fabric. I know there were a lot of questions that came out in the chat around how do I go about administering the Fabric tenant? How do I get approval? What do I need to do to spin up a capacity? These are some of the things that are going to be covered there. So if you had one of those questions or you're interested in that, you're trying to sell the case of Fabric, definitely follow through to the end. These are things that are going to be brought up when you're adopting any type of new solution like Fabric. Upgrade to Microsoft Fabric today. There is plenty of resources around how to purchase these capacities. What are some of the things that you need to account for depending on some existing licensing you have. You may already have access to Fabric and you just don't know it. So take a look at the licensing, talk to your teams that are administering this to see what you already have. It may be as simple as just enabling this feature within the tenant, and then you're off to build whatever it is that you want. As mentioned, you can try this for free. There is a trial offering where you can spin this up for X amount of days, work through this. I think it gives you a pretty decent size capacity. I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it's like an F64, which is top tier. So you'll have plenty of power to go through that. And with that, we're at the end. I do thank everyone that was able to attend today. Hopefully, you gained something from it. I know I enjoyed seeing what Tom had to offer, and it's been a privilege.
Same. So everything is said. It was fun. Thanks for attending our session. And please do not be shy and watch all the other sessions if you do not already, and do not miss the upcoming sessions. With this said, I would say goodbye. So I can wave with two hands at the same time. Josh's
Yeah.
I
Just for you,
see.
Tom. I'll wave with
Also,
both hands.
it's with two hands. Great. Thank you very much. Goodbye.